Hello folks, it's Gordon here, hope all is well with you. In this video I've called Women's Challenge Cup Final, because if I haven't been talking about women's sport enough lately, today, as well as watching two quarterfinals in the Women's World Cup football, it's time for the Women's Rugby League Challenge Cup Final at Wembley. Now, the Men's Challenge Cup Final has been held at Wembley since 1929, I think, so nearly 100 years. And the Men's Challenge Cup itself has been going 127 years. And I have said many times, I have been watching sport since the early 70s, nearly 50 years I've been watching sport. And I grew up watching the Men's Challenge Cup Final at Wembley, saw all the greats of English Rugby League play in the Challenge Cup Final. Fantastic. I like rugby league. It's very different to rugby union. It's more aligned to the NFL, and the NFL is was descended from rugby, and rugby league is more similar structure-wise to the NFL. I do enjoy both games. It's a bit more brutal, I'd say, than rugby league is. So, if the Men's Challenge Cup Final has been going for 127 years, and it's been at Wembley since 1929. What about the Women's Challenge Cup Final? Well, today's Women's Challenge Cup Final at Wembley was the first time it's been held at Wembley. It's never been held at Wembley before. And the Men's Challenge Cup, as I say, has been going 127 years. How long do you think the Women's Challenge Cup has been going on? The first one was back in 2012, so only 11 years. When I talk about the Women's World Cup football, the first one of those was only in 1991, only just over 30 years ago. It's only 11 years that there's even been a Women's Rugby League Challenge Cup. And in years gone by, it's been held at amateur league grounds in front of a few hundred people. I've seen it in previous years on television because, as you know, I've been following women's sport a lot. I've seen it on the BBC before, held at Ellen Road in Leeds, smaller club grounds. But it's the first time at Wembley today, held as a double header before the men's final. Now, a lot of people in women's sport say they should be held separately, they should be separate events. And in rugby union, they used to hold women's matches. They tried holding women's matches in double headers with the men's, and it didn't really work because they held the women's match after the men's match. So when the women's match was going on, they were doing television interviews at the side of the pitch while the women's match was going on, talking about the men's match. And a lot of the crowd left after the men's match. So for this one, the Challenge Cup Final, they put the women's games on before the men's game. And, I don't know what the attendance was. It's very hard to give an official attendance figure for these double-header type of games. But Wembley Stadium holds, 80,000, something like that. If I had to guess how many people were there, it would have been 5,000 maybe. It looked empty. The audience, the crowd were rattling about in the stadium, let's put it like that. So it didn't look great. And one of the players afterwards was talking about this idea about having having the final separately. And she said, we just haven't got the numbers. We just haven't got the numbers in the crowds at the moment. So she's quite happy playing a double header with the men. The final today was held between Leeds and Saints. And shall I tell you the result? No, I won't tell you the result, but obviously it was won by either Leeds or Saints. And the last two finals were won by Saints, St Helens. And the last 5 finals were won by either Leeds or St Helens. So you can see the strength of depth, maybe, it could be argued, is not there either in women's rugby league. But let's not forget, we should remember, that men's Challenge Cup Final has also been dominated by teams over the years. St Helens have dominated the men's finals for years. Wigan, Widnes, all these teams have dominated the men's Challenge Cup final. So there's no reason why women's Challenge Cup final shouldn't be dominated by certain teams. It's not necessarily a problem with that, but the problems in the numbers of people watching aren't yet there in rugby league. Will it get there? Well, who knows? I mean, I would say that the numbers aren't there in men's rugby league, really. It's quite a small sport, men's rugby league. So how big will women's rugby league ever get? I don't know. Women's football is slightly different because obviously men's football is described as the global game. It is massive. Not many sports bigger than men's football globally. So it's no surprise that women's football is growing and will carry on growing almost at the moment exponentially. For example, one of the quarterfinals held today in Australia was between Australia and France, and the attendance there was 49,900 odd, so just a couple of ticks under 50,000, the biggest attendance for any women's football game ever in Australia. This is one of the reasons I love women's sport. Crowd attendance record broken in Australia for women's football in Australia. The first time ever for Women's Rugby League Challenge Cup final at Wembley. This is why I love women's sport, because sport, in my view, is just as entertaining as the men's version. But the women have to overcome these challenges. They're still blazing the trails. That's what they're doing. They're still trailblazers. They're still setting first. The first time ever. The first time ever. You don't really get that in men's sport. The only time really you get that in men's sport is world records in whatever sport it may be. But you get this kind of thing, barriers being broken in women's sport still. So it happened today. There's two examples today, August the 12th, 2023, as I'm recording this video. Two examples today of women's sport breaking the barriers as they grow and try and catch up with the men. That's why I love women's sport. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear what you think. Have you ever watched the men's Rugby League Challenge Cup final at Wembley? How much women's sport do you watch? Are you one of those women types? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm trying to think how many men I've persuaded over the years I've been banging on about women's sport. How many men I would say I've persuaded to watch women's sport? Not many. Not many, to be honest. It is a slog. It's a slog for the women trying to do it, because as I try and do it, I find that the only type of people that I would think I would convince to watch women's sport are sports fans full stop. And sports fans full stop, almost by definition, have tended to be fans of men's sport. So they either haven't got time to watch women's sport as well, or they haven't got the interest to look at women's sport because their time and interest is focused on the men's sport. There's nothing wrong with that. You can't criticise that, but it does go to show the challenge that women's sport still has to go. So let me know what you think. I've gone into waffle mode. I'm going to stop. Getting up to 10 minutes, 8.5 minutes. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below wherever you happen to be seeing this video. Signing off for now, wishing you as ever health and happiness. I'll speak to you again soon.